Joshua Gage came along and gave Poetry Pea a masterclass in Toriawase a while back. We asked you to write some haiku and senryu using the prompts he suggested in the workshop. I was chatting to some of the editing team a little while ago, and they mentioned that the submissions for Toriawase were really accomplished. So thank you to Joshua for supplementing our knowledge on Toriawase, and to all you poets who sent us poems as a result of his prompts. Today, I'm going to read a selection of them to you. My name is Patricia, and you are most welcome to the Poetry Pea Cast. This week, haiku and senryu, spoken aloud. You can't beat a bit of spoken poetry, can you? I've lots of people to thank for today's podcast. Joshua Gage, obviously, he was our inspiration. All the poets who took part, because there'd be no podcast without you, thank you. And the editing team, Lorraine Padden, Bandana Parashar, Robert Horrobin, Liam Maguire and Ron Craig. They're a dear, dear bunch and work really hard on the submissions, which, I should tell you, are judged anonymously. These poems, which are just a sample of the poems we accepted, will be in the Poetry Pea Journal 2/24. If you're on the mailing list, you'll be automatically notified of its publication, and if you're a Buson or an ISA member, it will drop into your email box on the day of publication. If you could support the podcast with a membership, please do. We'd really appreciate help with our running costs. Details will be in the show notes. Now let's open with the first of our nominations for the judge's choice. Robert Horrobin has joined me to read the first one. Robert, as you know, is one of the editing team, and we're going to hear from a few of them this time. Perhaps you'll get a little insight into what we think while we're going through the poems. Anyway, here's Robert with a poem by Paul Callis.
Hello. Moonlight on top of slanting roofs, melting snow. Moonlight on top of slanting roofs, melting snow. And I really kind of enjoyed this because I like the surface simplicity of the poem. So on my first read, I thought it was just a simple, objective nature poem that described a particular moment in time. But on the second reading, I thought that the stillness and lack of motion within the scene captured an actual moment of transition, funnily enough. Snow is a key go for winter, but melting snow hints at transition. So I thought it was perhaps a reference to a slow change of season, or perhaps it's the change is slightly more dramatic than that. If you live in a part of the world, as I do, where snow falls by the inch, you know that it will lay on a roof, and it will lay on the roof, and it can lay there for days, and then all of a sudden it will fall off as a kind of a mini avalanche. So regardless, I thought that the haiku established that there was a sense of stillness, but something might be happening. I don't obviously know what was happening. Anyway, that's my interpretation of the poem.
Thanks, Robert. Water from an old hose, cool as cucumber. Water from an old hose, cool as cucumber. Robert Whitmer. Potato harvest, aroma of earth in the barn. Potato harvest, aroma of earth in the barn. Govind Joshi. Warmer days, the geese return with the same V. Warmer days, the geese return with the same V. Ravi Kiran. Grandma's kitchen, putting her old teacup away with care. Grandma's kitchen, putting her old teacup away with care. John Hawkhead. Hot evening, the long, loud argument softens down the street. Hot evening, the long, loud argument softens down the street. Rob McKinnon. Fractured evergreen, visiting where they survived the fatal crash. Fractured evergreen, visiting where they survived the fatal crash. M.R. Diffibor. The scent of perfume in a box of faded pictures. Spring bloom. The scent of perfume in a box of faded pictures. Spring bloom. Bona M. Santos. And I was very lucky to hear Bona read that in a haiku group recently. Thanks, Bona. Golden hour. 3 crows watching from a sugar maple. Golden hour. 3 crows watching from a sugar maple. Joshua St. Clair. Vivaldi. Birdsong quickening after spring thunder. Vivaldi. Birdsong quickening after spring thunder. Cynthia Anderson. The clear winter sky, eyes drawing my father's constellation. The clear winter sky, eyes drawing my father's constellation. Lakshmi Iyer. Fallen leaves, still with a silhouette of calmness. Fallen leaves, still with a silhouette of calmness. Pravat Kumar Padi. First light, the clank of a spoon in her teacup. First light, the clank of a spoon in her teacup. Mona Bedi. Hug therapy, a packet of seeds on the windshield. Hug therapy, a packet of seeds on the windshield. Ilan Chogan. Ilan, I wish people would leave me a packet of seeds on the windshield. Which reminds me, I have a packet of sunflowers that I should really think about getting into the soil. Flat lake, so many galaxies for dessert. Flat lake, so many galaxies for dessert. Brett Brady. Now, I'm not familiar with the place that Brett writes from, and I wrote to him asking about Kigo, the Kigo in this poem. You all know how much I appreciate Kigo in haiku, and bless him, he wrote back to me. It's summer, Kigo, he said. The mosquitoes have served up the main meal. The lake is flat and calm. And the trout, or koi, bass, etc., which are Kigo in their own right, are just about ready for dessert, which are the stars. He feels that we don't have to directly name Kigo, that we can imply it. In fact, he says, the subtlety of the implied deepens the experience and thus enhances the veracity of reality. In the composition of the picture, nothing is artifice as a result, nor subject to an appearance of pretension, nor fakery. Well, what do you think? Do send feedback, because I think this is going to make an interesting podcast episode, all on its very own. Any help you can give me with the research? Much appreciated. Now let me thank the sponsors of the podcast, our members and those who have donated in the last few months. Currently, our Shiki members are Bona M. Santos, Carol Judkins, Colette Kern, George Swede, Linda Ludwig, and Chad Boykin. Our ISA members: Doris Lynch, Matthew Diffibor, Rupert Anand, Michael Winter, Kristen Lindquist, C. Jean Downer, David Cox, Sangeeta Kalarikal, who I have to say was really helpful in finding out how the monthly donations worked. If you need to know, I know now. Thanks, Sangeeta. Cynthia Anderson, Tony Williams, Melissa Dennison, Marjorie Pizzoli, Laurie Kiefer, Ivanka Ettinger, Steve Barr. And our Busan members: Alison Whipple, A.K. Finch, Susan Andrews, Lindsay Sears, Michael Flanagan, Jill Mura, Susan Spooner, Jenny Shepherd, Debbie Olson, and Kimberly Kuchar. And of course, everyone who's left us donations bought the journal or the essays that accompany some of the podcasts. Thanks to everyone who sponsors us, however they do it. It does take away some of the strain, whether financial or some of the workload. Sincerely thanks to you all, because I couldn't run the podcast without your help and the help of the volunteers. Which reminds me, anyone understand Facebook and have the time to be administrators for a Facebook page? Do get in touch. I need help. Headstand Bridge, the Spanish wine colour of the longest evening. Headstand Bridge, the Spanish wine colour of the longest evening. Emile Carla. From a cloudless sky a feather falls, nest-building birds. From a cloudless sky a feather falls, nest-building birds. Melissa Dennison. On a hawk's wings, the glint of sunlight, spring morning. On a hawk's wings, the glint of sunlight, spring morning. Susan Andrews. Spring night, the air awake with mogra. Spring night, the air awake with mogra. Rupa Anand. Winter migrant, a northern shoveler swoops the lake. Winter migrant, a northern shoveler swoops the lake. Nina Singh. First flies, gorse pods pop on the heath. First flies, gorse pods pop on the heath. Christopher Jupp. Yellow leaves and sunlight, the same story. Yellow leaves and sunlight, the same story. Adam Haver. Fog-shrouded lake, the laugh of a loon resounds. Fog-shrouded lake, the laugh of a loon resounds. Kim Clue. Spring marathon, the cloud of butterflies towards the cherry tree. Spring marathon, the cloud of butterflies towards the cherry tree. Marie Durley. Elderflower, an old pond fringed with foam. Elderflower, an old pond fringed with foam. Tony Williams. At the moment, Tony, I was up at the old frog ponds near my house. And they're not fringed with foam, but there's so much pollen round the edges. A bag of cherries hanging on the fence. Evening heat. A bag of cherries hanging on the fence. Evening heat. Daniela Miso. Mountain fog. In a clear cut, the scent of pine. Mountain fog. In a clear cut, the scent of pine. Kurt Paulish. Next up, a familiar voice to the podcast. Ron often joins us as a community judge. And of course, he's another dedicated editor for Poetry Pea. As usual, he's come along today to offer up another great analysis. Cheers, Ron. I give you Ronald K. Craig.
Haiku I chose is this: rose pruning, hidden expressions in the wide brim hat. Rose pruning, hidden expressions in the wide brim hat. This haiku by Shizuko Itsukino is a premier example of Toriawase. Here the poet focuses on a person with whom she has an emotional connection, although rightly, that person's identity is not exposed. The verb, pruning, has multiple layers of meaning. Not only is the poet pruning roses, but likely is coming to terms with her human subject by cutting away some memories while cherishing the most important ones. Akigo is employed. The best time to prune roses is very late, winter or early spring, around the time when new growth begins. Pruning helps prevent disease and encourages flowering. As gardeners know, it is unlikely a rose bush will be killed by over-pruning as they grow and fill in quickly. Psychological research states that a facial expression or affect can be a form of non-verbal communication. Expressed involuntarily, it is called verbal leakage. In Shizuko's poem, she may not want to express her feelings openly and possibly is unaware of what is transpiring on her face. The physical act of pruning, however, stimulates thoughts that release a variety of emotions that need to be dealt with. Which of the myriad human expressions are showing on her face? The act of pruning itself gives a hint. Healthy stems need to be saved, and unhealthy ones need to be removed. Some emotions need to be pruned, accepted for what they are, forgiven, while others need to be nurtured. Such recollections support the emotional connection to bloom and grow. Finally, these emotional gyrations take place under a wide brim hat. The poet probably is signaling an extremely private matter. Are others nearby who might see her emotional leakage? Possibly, but her memory pruning is shielded from all but herself. Will this be shared with her subject at an opportune time? This speculation drives us to consider scenarios of our own. We are all given the opportunity to prune, along with the poet. Overall, an excellent poem.
Thank you, Ron. I never worry about over pruning. I just go mad. And the poor little roses manage to grow time and time again. So it's true. They don't die from over pruning, at least not in my garden. Thank you very much. Summer's end. Fireweed in full bloom, blanketing the meadow. Summer's end. Fireweed in full bloom, blanketing the meadow. Bonnie J. Shearer. Backyard soliloquy. Smoke rings catch the night wind. Backyard soliloquy. Smoke rings catch the night wind. C. Jean Downer. Last run. East face slope. Whispers hush. Last run. East face slope. Whispers hush. Emily Bernhardt. Mixed hues. Garden smells. Faintly jazz. Mixed hues. Garden smells. Faintly jazz. Jama Sanyal. Flies buzzing over a pushcart of mangoes. Afternoon market. Flies buzzing over a pushcart of mangoes. Afternoon market. Minal Sarosh. In between showers. The evergreen oak ripples the city pond. In between showers. The evergreen oak ripples the city pond. Maeve O'Sullivan. Blackberry blossoms. With a little song, the starling snags some breakfast. Blackberry blossoms. With a little song, the starling snags some breakfast. Craig Kidner. Mountain temple. A spring echo rings the bell over and over. Mountain temple. A spring echo rings the bell over and over. Richard Tice. I like the way over and over creates that sense of time passing. Summer's end. A child runs to his fallen kite. Summer's end. A child runs to his fallen kite. Alvin B. Cruz. Rush of spring. Bluebells in a hurry to beat the leaves. Rush of spring. Bluebells in a hurry to beat the leaves. Ruth Happel. Spring fever, the cold white light of the fluorescent bulb. Spring fever, the cold white light of the fluorescent bulb. Elliot Sears. A few blossoms on the midwife's umbrella. Spring dawn. A few blossoms on the midwife's umbrella. Spring dawn. Laurie Kiefer. Very unusual, Laurie, thank you. Spring rain. The jingle of mosquitoes against the security bulb. Spring rain. The jingle of mosquitoes against the security bulb. Lindsay Sears. Mulled wine breath. Her hands still warm in December air. Mulled wine breath. Her hands still warm in December air. Gareth Nurden. Craig by Craig. Sunset finds the farmer's eyes. Craig by Craig, sunset finds the farmer's eyes. Bill Fay. Two-way traffic. A silent box turtle cleaves the midline. Two-way traffic. A silent box turtle cleaves the midline. Doris Lynch. Our next judge is another familiar voice on the podcast, Sandra Simmons, who I think forgives me for the British way I say her name. I tried the American version, but honestly, I mangled it horribly and could not insult her with that version. Thank you, Sandra, for your forgiveness and your analysis. Shall we hear it?
Distant hills soften into the dark, first star. Distant hills soften into the dark, first star, by Fumio. The first line opens on a landscape composed of distant hills. Here we find the notion of space. The descriptor distant reveals the hills in their larger-than-life form, unattainable, always far away, horizons that keep extending the longer one gazes upon them. Yet, hills can be attained, but then they would symbolize a climb up to the heights, thus presenting a distance to cover. As hills, they also represent time because they're smoother, more rounded, older geological forms. These are not like mountains that can be truly too high to reach. In comparison, despite being distant, hills feel closer than mountains, a choice that Fumio has made perhaps to soften the scene or to put distance between this place and the traditional image of a mountain so often used in haiku. These hills are plural, so each hill forms part of a chain, which the sound of S echoes, connecting the first line and the second. Distant hills soften. Time becomes more evident in the second line as the hills soften into dark, that is to say, into the evening light, which makes edges seem softer through the softening of the sharpness between objects and shadows. In such an increasingly dim light, often accompanied by deepening shadows, the hills may appear even rounder, melting into or perhaps embracing the darkened sky. We see the first star appear as a contrast to the dark. Twilight twinkles in a similarly distant way to the hills. It covers the hills and draws the eye upward toward an unattainable place, one that humankind constantly dreams of reaching. Both star and hills belong to a kind of dream for wandering, a distance that nevertheless calls out and invites. What I find particularly stunning is the way the movement of the day as it closes and night as it opens rests on these two visual points, one belonging to the Earth's contours, the other to the expanse of the sky. Like a fading of one scene and the revelation of another, Fumio orchestrates a simple and familiar daily changing of the guards, as it were, allowing readers to revisit the familiar scene as a change in perspective. The emphasis lies on the contrast between dark and star. The light contrasts with the dark, but the second line carries the reader in a fluid movement that requires a rereading of that second line in order to grasp how the star is bright, not dark, yet needs the darkening of the sky to reveal itself. This is the point where reflection occurs and which holds all the force of Toriawase. In this well-crafted haiku, the juxtaposition of night and day mimics the movement of this natural, always fascinating phenomenon. Bravo to Fumio, and thank you, Patricia.
Thanks, Sandra. Dog days. A boy at the bubbler waters his puppy. Dog days. A boy at the bubbler waters his puppy. Natalia Kuznetsova. Morning mist. Coming up the path, a waddle of ducks. Morning mist. Coming up the path, a waddle of ducks. Ievonka Ettinger. Ievonka, I was walking along a stream in the middle of Zurich City on Saturday, and there were a little squadron of ducks sailing up the river with Mum and Dad. How cute, and in the middle of a city. Very unusual, I thought. There's got to be a haiku in it, just haven't written it yet. Fasting blood test. Storm clouds roll in. Fasting blood test. Storm clouds roll in. Krista Pandy. Fresh snow. She again makes good impressions. Fresh snow. She again makes good impressions. Biswajit Misra. Tibetan singing bowl, round and round, chasing swallows. Tibetan singing bowl, round and round, chasing swallows. Christina Povero. Withering heat, the runt of the litter dies in my palm. Withering heat, the runt of the litter dies in my palm. Rowan Beckett. Misplaced gloves, wet snow the night before trash day. Misplaced gloves, wet snow the day before trash day. Jerome Bergland. Hope you found them, Jerome. Simmering dewdrops on a branch, how gentle the breeze. Simmering dewdrops on a branch, how gentle the breeze. Carla Ramesh. A cardinal at the empty feeder, staring back at me. A cardinal at the empty feeder, staring back at me. Michael Flanagan. Cardinals are not birds we see here in Switzerland, or at least I don't think we do. I never have. But I did see them at Christmas down in South Carolina. Lovely things. Mountain campfire, a jug of wine cooling in the creek. Mountain campfire, a jug of wine cooling in the creek. Colette Kern. Snow billows. Mouse tracks disappear. The owl departs in silence. Snow billows. Mouse tracks disappear. The owl departs in silence. John Paul Caponegro. Spring Creek. Clear and cool her look. Spring Creek, clear and cool her look. Messier Moldovan. December flight. A young man lifts my luggage. December flight. A young man lifts my luggage. Mimi Ahern. Lucky you, Mimi. Spring winter. The cats circle and cry for early dinner. Spring winter. The cats circle and cry for early dinner. Thomas Fester. Mimosa yellow. Flying over the water. The cormorant. Mimosa yellow, flying over the water, the cormorant. Angiola inglese. Ripples break the surface through a winter haze. Rising carp. Ripples break the surface through a winter haze. Rising carp. Clive Grucock. Not quite the last nomination, but the last of the editing team to nominate this time. I think you'll hear from this analysis the amount of thought that goes into our choices, which I said at the beginning, are done anonymously. The team don't know who they're reading. This time it's Liam Maguire's choice. Let's find out his thinking. Thanks, Liam.
Abstaining from thoughts of you. Lent. Abstaining from thoughts of you. Lent. Amita Paul's haiku immediately immerses us in its author's inner world, The use of the present continuous tense and the long A sound in abstaining establishes an ongoing willful resistance against an unnamed object or desire. Yet it's not until the close of the second line that we realise this resistance centres on thoughts of a person, abstaining from thoughts of you. This delayed clarification enriches the opening line's sense of intimate struggle, and thus leading to an invitation for empathetic self-reflection on the challenges of extricating oneself from unhealthy attachments or relationships. Crucially, the poem's depth is unlocked through the third line's ingenious Toriawase juxtaposition, Lent. The Christian context of Lent, fasting, spiritual testing, sacrifice, resonates powerfully with the author's theme of willed abstinence from temptation. Functioning as more than a kigo, it here symbolizes transition through trial, a period of self-denial and temptation, culminating in personal renewal. However, Amita's stylistic masterstroke is to represent this transformative transition with the stark monosyllabic Lent. While this choice defies the lyricism that's typically praised in haiku lines, the word's blunt simplicity paradoxically heightens its impact, encapsulating the harsh reality of combating one's inner demons. The line's minimalist starkness, standing alone, leaves a sense of being simultaneously unfinished yet complete. The cycle continues, but with hope for change. This dynamic tension compels rereading and deeper contemplation on the haiku's profound vulnerability and spiritual themes. Haiku, like all poetry, has its rules. Whether one thinks Amita breaks these rules or merely bends them may be a point of contention for some readers. Certainly, other submissions captured a more traditional expression of Toriawase. Yet it was Amita's daring and fresh approach to this aesthetic that sets her poem apart. For she does not merely tell us what is happening or even show us. Rather, she invites us into a deeply psychological moment to experience it for ourselves. Ultimately, it's this invitation to experience that, for this judge, separates merely good haiku from the great.
Thank you, Liam. Yeah, I'm glad you put that last paragraph in, because I can see people writing to me saying it's not Toriawase, but I think it does fall into the remit we gave ourselves. So thank you very much for that. 10 different photos of Texas mallow, 1 blurry damselfly. 10 different photos of Texas mallow, 1 blurry damselfly. Kimberly Kucher. Irregular branches, the morning sun on my skin. Irregular branches, the morning sun on my skin. C.X. Turner. Mount Eden, we play hide and seek with the rain. Mount Eden, we play hide and seek with the rain. David Cox. Hedgehog peers out from a dry leaf pile. Spring morning. Hedgehog peers out from a dry leaf pile. Spring morning. Ian Speed. City chill. Garlic, capers and lemon sizzle. City chill. Garlic, capers and lemon sizzle. John S. Green. I'm going to have to try that combination, John. Sounds delicious. March winds, the chaotic sound of wind chimes. March winds, the chaotic sound of wind chimes. Linda L. Ludwig. Propped in the corner a rusted shovel. Fern unfurls. Propped in the corner a rusted shovel. Fern unfurls. Marjorie Pezzoli. And to close out the podcast today with the final judge's choice is Joshua Gage. I don't need to say anything about Joshua, do I? We all know he's a superstar. Let me just hand over to him.
Okay, poets, I just want to start off by saying that those of you who followed the drinking game rules had over 25 shots of punch. I would love to hear about what happened afterwards and whether or not you got arrested, so send me a message and tell me all about it. In the meantime, the coffee in my mug is Honduran, the art on my wall is from HE Creative, and the poem on my lips is from Jenny Shepard. On my sickbed, duvet and hot water bottle and winter clouds. On my sickbed, duvet and hot water bottle and winter clouds. First of all, I want to applaud Shepard for attempting and succeeding with one of the more challenging prompts I provided. Gold star to you, Jenny, for following written and verbal instructions. For those of you who struggled with this prompt, here's another example of how this phrasing uses Toriawase to create and heighten the mood for the reader. We have, rather than fragment phrase, a context event haiku. The context is established in line 1. The speaker is sick and in bed. Luna says hello. She's being a butt. Then we have a list of things that are supposed to bring comfort and help combat the chills of being sick, including the Kigo in the last line, winter clouds. Note how the ellipsis extends the second line, forcing an even longer pause than traditionally associated with a line break, delaying the reveal of the third line and the Kigo and its comfort even further, heightening the mood of the poem for the reader. While there is a sense that all of these things are indeed comforting, the poet also manages to convey the tediousness of being sick. The images chosen and the order in which they're presented helps the scene accumulate with the Kigo, which is expansive and resonant and carries the emotions further. Outstanding job by Jenny Shepard.
Oh, how am I supposed to follow that? That's not fair. I'll do my best. What a treat for me to revisit these poems, because of course I read them all as they go through the process. Don't forget, there are more and they'll all be in the Poetry Pea Journal 224, out very soon. If you want to be one of the first to know and receive an early bird discount, make sure you're signed up to our mailings. It's easy to do on the website. Thanks once again to everyone involved in the podcast and to you for coming along to listen. I'm very grateful that you're here. And if you ever have feedback or a comment you'd like to make, please do just send me over an email. Don't forget to review the podcast wherever you get yours. And very important, share the podcast with your haiku friends. Maybe even people who enjoy poetry, but for some reason or other haven't yet got enthused by haiku and senryu. I believe there are one or two folks out there. Hard to believe, I know. See you next time. Except that if you're listening in real time, the 30th of April or thereabouts, I'm taking a 2-week break. Back on the 21st of May, with something a little special, I hope, if the internet fairies are kind. Until then, do keep writing. And remember that I'll not be putting poems in the show notes. The journal will be imminently published, and if you're signed up for the mailing, you'll hear about it straight away. And as I recorded this a teeny bit early, you may even know about it now. Woohoo! Anyway, any questions? You know where I am. Email me. Ciao!